Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to part one of the new set of Project Orchid updates. New sets of plants, although some of them have been brought forward from last time. And in the first set of updates, I'll effectively be benchmarking the plants. So we'll take a look at them as they are as we head into the growing season. And then the idea is in 3 months' time, we'll look at them again and look back to pictures of what they look like today, and then in another 3 months' time we'll do it again and look back to the previous set of pictures, and at the year end, at the end of the year, we'll look right back to today. So we'll be looking back over a whole growing season for the sets of plants. I'll go over the plants and the reason why I've chosen them in this startup sort of video, because they've all got various reasons for being included and some might not be obvious. And this first set are basically Oncidium Alliance, so I've clustered these together, and nowhere near as many as in the last set because this video took too long. So right, let's have a look at the chosen few. Okay, and the first one on the list is Aliceara Tahitian dancer. The reason I've chosen this one is one of my larger Oncidium types. It is an intergeneric, and in addition to that it hasn't long finished blooming, so it's effectively right at the start of its growing cycle and as yet has not started its new growths. So at the moment it's in that sort of semi-dormant period, I'll call it. So it's finished blooming but hasn't started a new set of growths yet. I'll lift it out of its black pot so we can have a look at the roots, but that's the typical view that we will stick to. This space around the front of the pot was deliberately left when it was potted up, because that's where the new growths will come. Well, fingers crossed. If they don't, then the plant's in the wrong part of the pot. So it's got a pretty good root system. The new set of growths will produce even more roots, but as I said, hopefully if the new growths come out where predicted, which is in this area here, then they've got plenty of room. The plant hasn't been in its pot too long, media's not breaking down, and just as I've turned it I've seen the first sign of a new growth. So it is just coming into growth. That's the first sign there. I don't see any others yet. No, just the one. Okay, so that's that plant. Put a picture of the bloom up so we know what we're aiming at. And there is no reason whatsoever why this shouldn't be back in bloom before we reach the end of this series of videos, basically. As I said, it's finished blooming not that long ago, so it should be back in bloom, I would say, in about 10 months' time. But let's get some new growths going first. So that's for plant number one. Right, plant number two is Oncidium chrysomorphum, so an Oncidium species. This was a gift not too long ago from Zana. And in the same box were the two species Miltonia, one of which has ceased to be, much to my annoyance, but that's how things go. Anyway, this plant was totally rootless, 0 zilch, not one. So what I actually did was I potted it up with a good amount of sphagnum moss to keep the base of the plant quite moist. And since then we have got roots. So roots are now in progress. So there's the chance the plant will now make it. It will be okay. It consists of a couple of old leafless bulbs, or a leafless bulb round here, and then we've got this bulb here. One of these two was actually in bloom when I got it. It did actually arrive in bloom, and what we've got now, relatively recently, is its new growth. Yeah. Now, whether it's going to bloom on this new growth or not, we'll have to wait and see. I would imagine it had a fair old bit of shock getting to me before I got it, and being rootless, it's got some recovering to do, but it's in progress. So this will be a good one to watch. So starting from 0 roots, at this point in time we have some roots. It's not an extensive root system, but we also have a new growth. So we'll see what we can do with this one as the year goes on. Right, so this one has got an unusual name, Banfieldara. You can virtually guarantee anything with "ara" on the end is an intergeneric, but not going to say across the board, but you know, you've got Aliceara, Banfieldara, there's quite a lot of "aras" around, and this is one of them. This is an unusual plant because it has an unusual trait of the older pseudobulbs turning an incredibly dark colour, almost black. Quite worrying if you didn't know that that's what it does. This has been in a state of recovery for a long time. I haven't seen blooms on this for an incredible amount of time, and it's almost been thrown away several times, but at this particular point what we've got is a growth round here that is pushing on quite nicely and starting to form a pseudobulb. Whether that's going to be good enough to actually produce a spike or not, I don't know. I haven't seen this growing for so long, I've forgotten. And then we've got another new growth pushing on here, which is quite strong and pushing some roots out in a very strange place, but I suspect there's some more going down into the pot as well. And then round the back here in a very odd place, basically coming out of the oldest leafless pseudobulbs, is yet another new growth. So we've got 3 new growths in various stages. One swelling and showing a pseudobulb, one pushing on quite nicely, and one just starting. So we do have a root system. Yeah, we do have quite a good set of roots in there, and each of these new growths will be eventually pushing out some new ones. So we'll have some new ones digging down in the pot as well. So that's the state of play on that. I would like to think that at least one of those new growths will produce a spike and we'll see the blooms again. They are attractive, or this would have been long since gone because of the state of the plant. I don't tend to keep ugly looking plants unless they've got something worth hanging on for. And this one with me was more of the, I was determined to get the flipping thing to grow. It was just one of those I didn't want to give up on. I get like that sometimes. It's not sentimental, trust me, no sentiment at all. This was just a store-bought, you know, pretty blooms must have many eons ago. So we'll see what we can do with this as the season progresses, but it's showing good signs of progress for the first time in quite a few years. And we'll see if we can get some blooms on it. Right, and the next one was actually requested by several people. When I said I was going to get a new set of plants together for the Project series, Project Orchids series, several people said, can you include your new Psychopsis? And I wanted to anyway, but it was nice to have some interest prior to the series starting. So this is effectively a Psychopsis hybrid called Butterfly. It is spikeless. I've never owned a Psychopsis without a spike before, so if we're ever going to see this bloom, I've got to grow a spike from scratch, and I've never done that before. Now this had poor roots. I won't say no roots, it had a few, but not much going on for it at all. But what it did have was this new growth here and this new growth here. Now this one's pushed on quite well. Leaf is virtually fully mature, and this one may still do a little bit of growing. The leaf shapes vary on this plant, but I got this one not just for the blooms, but I like the mottled leaf varieties rather than the plain green ones, a bit like the Paphiopedilum sort of varieties. Now this new growth over to the left has no sign of new roots yet, but the new growth to the right does have, and they're just starting now. So it's starting to produce some new roots. What's going to happen next? I don't know. I really don't know what this is going to do next. It may produce some new growths. It may not do anything for a while. I don't think it's going to produce a spike, but we will have to wait and see. It's a relatively young plant. There are some quite small pseudobulbs in amongst there with associated small leaves. I think this has been grown on from a seedling. So it's at the start of its life, basically. Probably well, I don't believe it's bloomed. There would be signs of the base of the spike, and there isn't any. So that's the state of play with that one. Just starting out, new to the collection, and it's a relatively new variety, I think. If I've got the information, I'll put a pop-up with the I think it's a primary hybrid, I'm not sure, but I'll put the information up there if I've got it. And we'll see how this progresses. I have seen some people growing Psychopsis like weeds, taking off like rockets. So far I've never managed to achieve that. And that's probably in my case because it's too cold in here in the winter. Now the fact that this has managed to mature those two growths, or almost mature them, and start some roots in my winter is a good sign. So maybe this one is a little more cold tolerant than some of the others I've had. We'll see what we can do with it. It'd be great to at least get a spike going before the end of the 12 months is up and the series ends. But we'll see what we can do. So it's relatively recently mounted, and it was mounted with a fair bit of live moss. So we'll see if that grows as well. Yeah, we've got a project orchid, and some people will probably be more interested in the moss than the blinking plant. Anyway, that's that one. Right, so the next one is my Tolumnia Peach. When I chose this to go in the set of projects, it had 3 spikes on. Well, it's still got 3 spikes on, but it was the fact that it was the first Tolumnia I'd ever had that had grown well enough to actually produce 3 spikes at the same time. Most fans produced on Tolumnias only bloom once, but the spikes can be a little more accommodating than that. Now this, I don't touch it at the moment before I actually finish talking about it, because it's precariously balanced, and the only reason it's staying there is because the 3 spikes are squashed up against the cloth. It's the only reason it's staying there. It's a mount. It needs to stand up and hang, you know. But yeah, I mean the blooms are starting to fade now, but the spikes are branching. So we've got a branch here, yeah. We've got another one coming here, and I suspect this one will, yeah, there's a start of a branch there. So each of these spikes are going to branch and produce some more bloom. So it's going to be in bloom for some time. And now it's going to be quite interesting to watch the progress of the branches and see how long they take before they come into bloom, and how many we get. As far as the plant is concerned, I'll have to hold it from now on because I've disturbed it. It's quite a steady growing plant, and as Tolumnias go, I'd class that as medium sized. There are some very tiny Tolumnias, but Tolumnia Peach is, I'd say, about an average size, you know, the size of each fan. And this has produced fans in quite a few directions, which is why the plant's now reached a reasonable size, quite honestly. Well, certainly in my collection of Tolumnias. That large fan there, which has a spike coming out of it, that decided to grow downwards towards the ground and then curled upwards. So it does like to point itself either outwards or upwards. It's got an extensive root system that's down in the moss, all over the mount. Some of those roots look really old and tired, but trust me, they still function. They still work. The white ones are the newer ones, yeah? But as far as I'm concerned with Tolumnias, you don't get rid of the old ones, you leave them. They still function. And this has even got roots going around the back of the mount. So that's that representative of the Tolumnias, Tolumnia Peach. It's one of my better growing Tolumnias, and certainly the first one to ever produce 3 spikes at the same time. Although I do have another now, but this was the chosen one for this time round. Okay, now this is Miltonia Queen Ann, and like with the last set of project plants, I'm not picking all my best plants. It is highly likely that this plant has got a virus. So this one gets kept separate and watered separate. It's not allowed to touch anything else, and no water that's been on this plant drips on anything else, and it gets its own little regime basically. The reason I've still got it, even though I highly suspect it does have a virus, is the vigour of the plant doesn't look right for a virused plant. The reason I thought it might be virus was we had some strange markings on the leaves, but last time it bloomed there was some bad colour break on the blooms. So the combination of those two things, to me, and quite a lot of other people at the time said, well, most of the people said take it out in the yard and set fire to it. But why I've kept it is it's got 4 new growths. Yeah, we've got one coming out to the right, which again has some strange markings on the leaves. They're not squeaky clean. And then it's got another new growth just behind there. And then it's got another new growth here, which again has some strange markings, and another new growth there. So this plant, even though it's only got 2 pseudobulbs up this end of the plant, both still have their leaves, but it's now got 4 new growths. And this end pseudobulb here has 3 new growths coming out of it. So far, there is no sign of a new root system being generated. Yeah? And this new growth here, hang on, let me see if I can stand it up again. It's quite accommodating, this mount. It does actually stand up. There we go. Don't get this new growth confused with this leaf. This leaf is on the old pseudobulb. Yeah? But these leaves on this new growth do not look good. They're marked. So we may still have a virused plant. But what I'm waiting for, if it'll accommodate, is a new set of blooms. And we may get a spike on every single one of these growths, who knows? And if the blooms are badly distorted with colour break, then I'll take it out in the yard and set fire to it. But at the moment it's being given a chance, on the grounds that if it can push up 4 new growths and still have the strength to do that, then we'll give it a chance. But if it is virus, before anybody asks, there's nothing can be done. There is no cure. No matter what you do to it, the virus is still there. So it's not like Fusarium, which is a fungus, which I won't say there's a cure for, but you can at least kill it to stop it spreading any further, even though the damage is already done. There is no cure for virused orchids. Some people keep them because the blooms are still okay, even though the plant is not going to live forever, but they enjoy it while they've got it. And others, hold it with a pair of tongs and ceremoniously take it outside and totally destroy it so that it can not get anywhere near anything else. Those are the 2 extremes. We're going halfway. So mine is kept separate, and it will stay that way. It'll stay that way even if the blooms come out okay, because I'll still have an element of doubt in my mind. But let's see what we can do with it. Keeping a virused plant is not the best of ideas. I could never advise anybody else to do it, but this is my place, my rules, and I'm giving it a go, but with caution. So that's that one. Okay, and the last one in this set is again a relatively recent acquisition. This came from Burnham's when I went to their 70th anniversary function, and this is Brassia Santa Barbara. Still got the Burnham's label in it. That's not like me. I know, I was going to say, and I doubt if that label will ever come out again because of what's going on in the pot. So this one was in bloom when I got it. Since then it has produced this new growth, which is maturing, the bulb is forming, and it's got a second new growth pushing on. This new growth over here at this size has produced a lot of new roots. This new growth over here hasn't yet, and if it does, they're going to be a little bit of distance from the pot, which could be a worry if it wasn't for what's in the pot. which is an excellent root system. Yeah? So even if this new growth's roots go aerial and then dry off, it won't matter for the success of the plant, simply because we do have, and now you can see why the tag wouldn't come out. The roots have decided you're not going anywhere, mate, and enclosed it. But yeah, Brassia Santa Barbara. And yeah, one of the larger, not my largest Brassia by any means, but I thought we'd pick on one of the larger plants along with the Tahitian dancer, so that we've got some variety in size and also variety in bloom types, and also variety in combinations of species and hybrids. Yeah, and this is two stages of development. In as much as this growth is maturing, whereas this one's only just starting. So if both of these bloom, and I see no reason why they shouldn't, they will bloom at quite different times, and it's highly unlikely they won't overlap. And it's probably going to maintain that gap on its two leads. Yeah? So forevermore, if it sticks to growing one new growth per direction of growth, it's probably going to maintain that gap, because I doubt if this lead will ever catch up with that one, because this one's quite a bit farther advanced. But it's a nice healthy plant with a very good root system, no reason why it shouldn't bloom. See what we can do with that one. Okay, so that's a set of plants for part 1, and in 3 months' time, when we revisit all of these orchids, that will be the same set of plants in part 1, the first update, yeah, and they'll be in the same order, so they're quite easy to follow. Well, that's what we did last time, and it seemed to work okay. Part 2 is a selection of dendrobiums, part 3 is a selection out of the Cattleya Alliance, and part 4, following on from the last set, is the cooler, shadier types, which is a mix of things like Masdevallias, Draculas, and that type of thing. So those are the 4 parts, and in the main 6 plants per video, per part. Okay, so that's benchmark those, a little bit about them and why they were chosen, and I'll do the same with the dendrobiums, which will be part 2, to follow on shortly. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.